Did you know your skin, your nails, and even your eyes might be trying to tell you something about your heart? You see, heart disease can be a really silent problem, but your body, it often sends out these subtle clues. In this explainer, we're going to learn how to actually read them.
So, let's ask the question, is your body hiding secrets about your heart? Today, we're basically going to become detectives. We're going to look for the visible signs that could point to different kinds of heart disease, and a lot of these you can check for right now, right at home.
And look, we're not just talking about the classic stuff like chest pain. The real clues, the ones that are sometimes super surprising, they can be hiding in plain sight. I'm talking about on your skin, in your eyes, and even on your fingernails.
So let's start our investigation with those clues that are hidden in plain sight. You know, the things you might be able to spot just by taking a good look in the mirror.
First up, we've got a sign that might really surprise you. It's a diagonal crease that runs right across the earlobe.
Yeah, this actually has a name. Frank's sign. The theory behind it is that it's a marker of vascular aging. See, your earlobe is just full of tiny blood vessels. And if they're aging and getting stiff way too early, the big concern is that the vessels around your heart might be doing the same thing. Now, it is a controversial sign for sure, but it's considered way more concerning if the creases are deep and you see them on both ears. So think of it less as a diagnosis and more of a really good reason to start a conversation with your doctor.
Okay, so let's move from the earlobes up to the eyelids. Have you ever noticed these flat, kind of yellowish patches, usually right near the inner corners of the eyes?
These are called xanthelasma, and how they form is actually pretty fascinating. So when your cholesterol gets too high, these little scavenger cells called macrophages start to just eat it up. But if they get a little too overindulgent, they turn into these bloated things called foam cells. That patch you see is literally just a clump of those cells. And that's the real worry. If this is happening on your skin, it's a pretty big hint that similar plaques could be building up inside your heart's arteries.
And here's the bottom line on this. Xanthelasma is a risk factor even if your blood cholesterol tests come back normal. Another thing to look for is a grayish-white circle around your iris. It's called a corneal arcus. Now, it's pretty common when you get older, but if that thing shows up before you're 45, that's a red flag. If you see either of these, take it as a strong signal to talk to your doctor about your cholesterol.
But you know, it's not always about cholesterol. Let's look at a different kind of skin sign. These waxy-looking bumps and some unusual bruising, especially around the eyes. These can be signs of a condition called amyloidosis. This is where misfolded proteins start clumping together and depositing themselves in the heart muscle, which causes it to get really thick and stiff. And early diagnosis is absolutely key here. So the things to look for are waxy, firm bumps around your eyes, ears, and neck, an enlarged tongue that might even have little indentations from pressing against your teeth, and the classic raccoon eyes, which is just this dramatic bruising that happens because the blood vessels have gotten weak.
All right, next up, let's talk about signs of faulty plumbing. We're talking about clues from your circulation that can tell you a whole lot about your heart's mechanics.
Have you ever seen a mottled reddish-blue kind of net-like pattern on your skin? This is called livedo reticularis.
Now, this isn't always a bad sign. It's actually really common when you're cold, and it usually just disappears as you warm up. But here's when it becomes a red flag. When it doesn't go away with warmth, or if you also have pain or skin ulcers with it. That could be a signal of something way more serious, like tiny cholesterol plaques blocking your blood vessels.
Okay, now for a set of signs that are all linked to one specific mechanical problem, a leaky aortic valve, also known as aortic regurgitation. This is basically when the heart's main one-way valve doesn't seal properly, so blood actually flows backward between each pump. And this causes a really rapid drop in pressure, which leads to some very visible pulsations.
And these pulsations can show up in some pretty wild places. I mean, you might actually see it in your fingernails, that's Quincke's sign. Or what looks like dancing arteries in your neck, that's Corrigan's sign. There's even de Musset's sign, which is this subtle little head nod that's perfectly in sync with your heartbeat. And the wildest one of them all, Muller's sign, where the uvula, you know the little thing that hangs down at the back of your throat, actually pulsates. All of these point to a valve problem that definitely needs medical attention.
All right, let's move into our final section, where we're going to cover an overworked heart's SOS. These are the direct distress signals that can point to heart failure.
One of the most classic signs of heart failure is swelling in the feet and ankles. It's a specific kind called pitting edema. This happens when the heart muscle just can't pump effectively and fluid starts to back up in the body.
And you can check for this yourself. Just press your fingertip firmly into a bony area on your lower leg, like your shin or ankle.
and hold it there for about 5 to 15 seconds. If you pull your finger away and it leaves a visible little dent, well, that's pitting edema. You can think of it like a traffic jam. When the heart pump gets weak, fluid backs up. Pressure builds in your veins, and then that fluid starts seeping out into the tissues around it.
But that fluid doesn't just collect in your legs. A much more serious situation is when it starts to build up in the lungs. This causes shortness of breath that gets way worse when you lie down flat, a symptom called orthopnea. It's actually why some people with heart failure find they can only sleep comfortably when they're propped up on a bunch of pillows or even in a recliner.
Okay, here's one more self-check for you. Press the tops of your 2 index fingernails together. See that little diamond-shaped window of light that forms between them? That's normal. If that window is totally gone, it's a sign called digital clubbing, and it's often caused by chronically low oxygen levels in your blood. In an adult, it could be a sign of a serious heart infection called infective endocarditis.
And all this brings us to a final and incredibly important question. When was the last time you actually checked your own pulse?
Because, it's not just about how fast your heart is beating. It's about the rhythm. A normal beat is predictable, steady, kind of like a metronome. But an irregular beat can feel completely random and chaotic. A really common cause for this is atrial fibrillation, or AFib. This is where the heart's upper chambers just sort of twitch aimlessly instead of pumping in sync. The real danger here is that blood can become stagnant and form clots, which can then travel up to the brain and cause a stroke.
So the crucial takeaway is this. If you or someone you know has an irregular heartbeat, even if it just comes and goes, it is absolutely something you need to get checked out. The good news is that AFib is easy to diagnose, and the treatment for it can dramatically lower the risk of stroke. So we've covered a lot of ground today, everything from earlobes to fingernails. You've now learned how to read some of your body's most interesting clues. So the question is, what are you going to do with this information? Remember, this isn't about self-diagnosing, not at all. It's about empowering you to have smarter conversations with your doctor and to be a better advocate for your own health.